Hi, everyone. Today's lecture will be about locomotor skills or gross and fine motor skills, or in the California Infant Toddler Learning and Development Foundation's biosocial skills or biosocial development, which focuses on the physical development of the infant, right? How they move, um, how they navigate around the environment or the space. And remember, gross motor is large body skills like your core, using their biceps, their quadriceps, when they're walking, trying to crawl, lifting up their heads. When they're engaging in tummy time. And fine motor is like the small muscles, right? And usually when we talk about fine motor ability, it's, you know, their hands or their fingers, um, and like the pincer grasp, or the palmar grasp is where they start. So we're going to talk about motor development today, and hopefully it won't be too long of a lecture. I don't like to keep my lecture. I like to keep my lectures under 20 minutes because the average adult attention span is 18 minutes, but I feel like 20 minutes is a good time for myself. So anyway, let's pull up the presentation. And so you'll notice it's a little different. These slides are a little different from what you have in the PowerPoint, because I feel like um, I needed more visuals. So anyway, gross and fine motor skills are locomotor skills. So through physical growth, um, or though physical growth is genuinely predictable, remember that each child is different. They grow at their own timing and pace. There is a balance between nature versus nurture, right? What were the genetics or the biology that we're born with, versus what is nurtured by in the environment. And different parts of the body grow at different rates. So at birth, the head accounts for a fourth of the body. And by age 2 years of age, the head is only a fifth of the body. Um, when it comes to physical growth of the body, um, it growth happens top down. So the head is always the biggest and heaviest part of, maybe not the heaviest, but it's always the biggest part of the infant's body and the toddler's body. It happens in a way called cephalocaudal development, where growth starts from head down to the rest of the body. And the first muscles to develop are those that control the head movements. This is why tummy time is really important, so that they can work on those neck muscles to lift their head, to look around, right? And then eventually push themselves up uh, by their hands, while on their bellies. Growth also happens proximate distally, where growth starts from inward out, or from the center of the body outward. And here's a little image. It's kind of a creepy looking baby, but this is cephalocaudal growth, where growth happens top down, right? The head down. And then proximate distally from inner to the out, right? So I like to use the example of, um, when a child is learning how to, or developing fine motor ability, right? The first thing that they do is they engage in something called a palmar grasp, right? Where they use their palm to retrieve something, right? They don't have the sophisticated or fine motor ability to use the pincer grasp to retrieve a Cheerio, right? But the first thing that they'll do, when they're engaging in tummy time, when they're in prone position, is they'll use the palm of their hand to try to grasp something, and then eventually, the more opportunities they get to self feed, to play with Play-Doh or clay, then that's when they refine their fine motor skills, and eventually they begin to use the pincer grasp to try to retrieve small objects, right? Like food, for example. So growth happens in this progression, okay? Especially brain and motor development. So at birth, the brain weighs only 25% of its adult weight, and by age 3, the brain is 90% of its adult weight. Myelinization, which is basically the process that is the speed at which neurons make connections. And so it's basically brain fat that coats and insulates neural fibers. Myelination accounts for a rapid gain in overall brain size after birth. Um, so yeah, so that's an important process, especially when it comes for like when they are exploring or investigating objects or the environment. Um, it's all about um, how the increased rate at which these connections are made, neuronal and synaptic connections are made. So as the child gets older, um, the myelination of basically the increased speed of nerve impulses um, become quicker, right? They happen at a quicker rate. And that is responsible for the more stimuli that an infant encounters. And as they mature, as they get older, there's an increase of myelination. And that's responsible, or that occurs when um, infants explore, when there's a freedom of movement, um, when they are immersed in different hands-on experiences. That's responsible for maturation of the brain. So when you think about an infant walking, right, it takes some time for children in early childhood to become coordinated and balanced, right? When you compare development between an infant or a preschooler, for example, right, they're not going to be as adept and um, coordinated or balanced as a teenager would, right? Because their myelination is still rapidly occurring in the brain. And so by the time they're 20, 25, they are more, and the more practice or experience they accumulate over in their life, the more adept that they are and stable in those gross motor skills. So hands-on learning, active exploration is really important for myelination um, and brain growth. In infancy, neurons in the brain move around and become arranged by function. So, there's different spheres of the brain, right? The subcortical levels are fully developed at birth, and the subcortical levels are responsible for reflexes and fundamental activities like breathing and heart rate. So these are like nervous system um, things that happen naturally, right, at birth. And this is when the doctors they use the APGAR scale to kind of test or to evaluate the infant, how responsive they are at birth. And so there are particularly sensitive periods for development, but it's never too late for a child to benefit from quality experiences. So the more interactive that you are with your infant, the more that you engage with them, the better, the higher quality those early learning experiences are for brain development and growth. Current brain research shows that movement develops as early as 6 weeks gestation as a result of both nature and nurture, and more neural connections and experience foster more coordination and stronger muscles. Again, that goes back to the more active exploration opportunities that children get, the more physically adept that they become. Increased myelination influences the development of fine motor skills, and experience helps form brain circuitry and is essential in fine-tuning the young brain's ability to respond to the environment. Everything that I just said about myelination. Reflexes are that's part of the whole subcortical sphere, or that's present at birth. Reflexes such as the Babinski reflex, the startle reflex, the sucking reflex, those are foundational for later movement. Um, and as they mature, those reflexes, they either disappear or they evolve into something different or something else, right? Something that's meant for survival. So the sucking reflex no longer is a reflex. It becomes more of an intentional reaction, right? The appearance and delay of certain reflexes help us learn about infants' development. So, as you know, what reflexes are present at birth? So there's the sucking reflex, the Babinski reflex, which is when you brush a child's the bottom of the foot or the other hand, their toes or their fingers fan out. The startle reflex is when they hear something really loud and their whole body, there's a knee-jerk reaction where their body just kind of jerks. What else? I'm just trying to think. Well, I said there's a Babinski reflex where, or not Babinski, the sucking reflex when something brushes by their mouth, they automatically turn and they start to suck, or they open up their mouth and they'll suck. All of those reflexes are present at birth, and that's something that nurses or doctors will look for um, as soon, when they conduct the initial evaluation. Motor skills and locomotion. So infants eventually progress from reflex movements to voluntary or intentional movements. Large or gross motor skills have to do with large muscles and big movements, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, and small or fine motor skills have to do with small muscles and more delicate movements. Locomotion is the ability to move from one place to another. Stability is the means to mobility. They have to be able to um, have a secure, solid base in order to coordinate and balance before they're able to walk, right? And navigate around the environment. You don't need to teach typically developing children how to sit or walk, right? The more that we utilize a form of freedom of movement, we create an environment that's conducive and safe for infant exploration, the more actively they're able to practice their fine motor and gross motor skills. And then they can focus on their own body and rely on their inner motivation or intrinsic and sometimes extrinsic motivation to work on these gross motor and fine motor skills. So not only dangling a toy, right? Using a positive stimuli to encourage movement. You want to create a learning environment that encourages movement and active exploration. So that might mean putting around soft toys, soft gym mats for them to kind of pull themselves up to a crawling position. And then if, uh, sometimes they need to fall, right? And roll over in order to learn. So when infants' muscles grow, they achieve strength and balance, their brain matures, and they put together the skills that lead to walking. So this slide focuses more on the fine motor ability. So manipulation is the development of hands and fingers. Along with manipulation, children gradually begin to have control of the small muscles in their mouth, their bladder, their rectum, feet, toes, and eyes. During the first 6 months, infants cannot necessarily control their grasping reflex, right? It takes practice. And eventually, as I said, so they move from the palmar grasp to the pincer grasp. Different ways that you can encourage fine motor skills is to, as I said, encourage them to do things themselves, feed themselves, reach for things, providing tactile experience like playing with clay or Play-Doh. The best way to do this is provide many opportunities every mealtime to self-feed. Playing with objects to grasp, hold, scoop, pour, and squeeze. Water play in the bath is always really fun. For motor development, encourage infants or gross motor development, encourage them to practice what they know how to do. Allow babies to move into positions themselves. Avoid rescuing babies. It's when you create an environment that's safe for them to roll around, when you put soft surfaces like thick blankets and gym mats, you'll feel as an adult, feel more comfortable with observing them explore and watching them kind of fall. Not from high places, but like if they were going to get up, try to pull themselves up to stand. Sometimes they lose their balance and fall backward. And as long as you have pillows around or thick gym mats, they need those risky experiences that they can learn from it, right? Only they can strengthen those stomach muscles, those core muscles in order to hold themselves up. You can't do that for them. Picking them up to stand them back up is not going to help them. They need to do it themselves. And again, no need to push development. Again, everyone develops, learns, processes information in their own timing and pace. Keep children in the position in which they are most free and least helpless. Provide opportunities for mastery, right? And not only for them physically, but provide them with encouragement and praise sometimes. I encourage toddlers to provide opportunities to wander, carry, dump, climb, and move in a variety of ways. And do appreciate that children will practice if given the freedom to do so, right? That all falls on us and the kind of environment that we design to encourage and normalize these types of experiences. When it comes to developmental delays, we as teachers, we are not clinically trained to evaluate or to diagnose. So if you notice that a child it might not be meeting certain physical milestones or cognitive milestones, these are observations that you make early and often with the primary caregiver at home. What's really important is that you make the connection between what you're observing to the development and and how it's impacting um, how they are functioning in your care, right? So if they're falling all the time, right, and it's been about 3 months and they're almost, I don't know, 13 months or something, you might just want to let families know that this is what I'm observing at school. Are you observing the same thing? These are the things that I'm doing to help encourage a more stable core, encouraging core strength. I'm doing more, encouraging your child to get outside more, to climb, and all that. So anyway, pairing that information with what you're doing and also asking for the families for their perspectives as well, because they might have perspectives that you don't necessarily see in the classroom, and then also be aware of signs in which may warrant further investigation. In terms of developmental delays, provide nurturance and support as needed. Give children some direct instruction or prompting when needed, and provide for basic experiences that emphasize the use of the senses. Okay, early intervention is key. It's so important. There are resources out there for families, and I think that what's really important, what's more important, is that we destigmatize delays, developmental delays, special needs, people with disabilities. I mean, that's a very ableist perspective. And we need to normalize diverse ways of developing, right? We're neurodiverse ways of being, neurodiverse ways of developing, neurodiverse ways of processing information, learning, and uh, just navigating the world. All right, so that was the end of the lecture. By no means did I provide comprehensive information. Please do continue to read the course text and then complete the module activities for further information about motor development.